Hi there, folks. I'm Emily.
And I'm El.
And we are, oh my word, a podcast where we review books, movies, musicals, etc. and give you our ratings and tell you what the content is so that you can make better choices about what you and your friends and children, etc. are consuming, because there's a lot of stuff in media these days. It's kind of gross and inappropriate.
Right. Which is why we have our pearl clutching scales, because it's how many pearls should we clutch over what is in this content right now. So violence,
Yes.
language, and romance, all on a scale of 0 to 4. 0 being the best, because that means it's not. And 4 being not the best, because that means it is, and it's a lot. And it's, why is this all here right now? And what is the age group this is geared toward, that you're putting all this stuff in it?
Yes. And we do a lot of young adult stuff and middle grade stuff, and we end up with a lot of 4s, and it's troubling.
Correct. Which is why we're here,
to say the least,
to let you know where the 4s are. Because the ratings don't always tell you, and the books don't always tell you.
Yes. And we don't want you to panic, so we have come up with our ratings. And that was an impeccable segue, and it was intentional, but sometimes it is so perfect, because today we were talking about Panic, which is a series on Amazon. It is based on a book by Lauren Oliver,
who we spoke about before I Fall. And that's her also. So she as an author has won it, because this is her second adaptation. And I'm pretty sure that she got to write the series. There's 10 episodes in it. I'm pretty sure she wrote the screenplays for all of them, which is a big win for an author. They don't always let you write it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
That also means that any change or stuff like that came from her, which is, when you have 10 episodes, if you have 10 episodes to write out a story that was originally just one book, that does give you way more space to explore characters or things like that. So there is a benefit to that, I guess. If you wanted sort of characters to be more prominent, which I think she did, give them more space.
Well, good job, Lauren Oliver. Props to you. So Panic, no one knows who invented Panic or when it first began. But in the forgotten rural town of Carp, Texas, the game is the only way out. Every summer, the graduating seniors risk their lives competing in a series of challenges that force them to confront their deepest fears for the chance to win life-changing money. Anyone can play. Only one will win. Let the games begin.
Bum, bum, bum.
And our ratings, oh yes. Our ratings on this one are, they've topped the charts, but remember, ladies and gents, topping the charts is negative. In our case, because violence, language, and romance are all a 4. Alt, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, oh my goodness. Okay, first of all, I only saw the series. I didn't read the book. So whatever I say about characters or whatever, and you're like, but the book, whatever, I'm telling you right now, I didn't read the book, okay? This is all based only on the series. Also, and I'm just going to throw it out there, even though it's not specifically about this, the content system has nothing to do with quality. So it's not a matter of saying oh, this is the worst thing I've ever seen, which sometimes it does happen like that. But that's not what these ratings are for. These ratings are for language, violence, and romance. So you might have loved the series. But why is everything a 4 is the burning question to be asking now. It's funny, I was actually looking up the book before watching this, and I saw some people were like, why is this being made into a series? There's not enough going on in here. The ratings on the book are not that high. Panic itself, I think the series also kind of got middling-ish sort of reviews, which whatever. But so here's the thing. We all know people who will do stupid things for money, right? Especially the more money. Some people don't need a lot of money. Some people don't need incentives to do stupid or dangerous things. And some people, the more money. First of all, who remembers Fear Factor, that TV series, right? Where people even cow brains or swimming with yucky, right? For money.
Yeah.
So we know that that's a thing. Now here, the teens do this because, if you get I think it's $50,000 or something like that. And that's a college education for a lot of them, right? They're obviously not for Stanford, or Harvard. But if you're going to a regular state college, you get yourself, and then by the time if you start working jobs and stuff like that, you're in a good place. So they think we're going to get to Carp, Texas with this money. Now, I don't know why there's this obsession of that this is the only way out. Especially because you do have the poor people and you have wealthy people. So if you could be a wealthy person in Carp, Texas, and they do show one of the characters has the dad's a judge or something like that, and he lives in a massive estate. So it's not that you can't, have a life unless they just want to get out of Carp because that's where they grew up and they just don't like the city anymore. But it's not you have all the people there. Like, you have very wealthy people. So that I don't really get. And I don't really get why that's the only way out. Because something that we actually learn, or maybe they just don't know, something we learned from Hillbilly Elegy, shout out to another episode. So we just did 2 episode shout outs, is that there's actually a lot of scholarships for poor people to go to colleges and stuff like that. There's a lot of people, like foundations and stuff like that. So maybe they just don't know about it. But then again, that also changes the stakes of the game, because the point is the desperation that I'll do anything to get out. So I guess if you don't have that, so fine. So that's the thing. So some of it is like jumping off, like the first challenge, if you're going to be part of it. It's all super secret that whoever invented Panic, each year there's 2 judges, and they secretly select the judges for the next year. So only the judges, now the judges could kind of compete, even though they're not supposed to win the game. But each year, so the judges are super secret. Nobody knows who the judges are. There's one guy who's kind of like the liaison who makes all the announcements for the judges. He doesn't know who the judges are. There's the one bagman who kind of keeps control of the money, which obviously nobody knows who that is, so no one should beat him up and take the money. So you have all these elements are at play. So on the one end, you have this like big thriller that's been set up. Now, you have certain challenges, like the first one, which is jumping off of a cliff. So it's like a dark time, and there's like a, I don't remember if it's a quarry. I don't remember where it is, but like if you jump off of this cliff into the water, you're part of the game now. And if you jump off the higher point, then you get extra points. And if you jump off the highest point, then you got extra points. Okay, so that's something that we could kind of see teens doing, jumping off of high cliffs into water, even though like we might think some of them are stupid, especially because there's rocks below and they could die from it. But that sort of thing that we're like, okay, $50,000, I could definitely see a lot of people jumping off the cliff. Some people will be afraid, but I could definitely see that. So you have all these different characters. The main character, her name is Heather. So Heather Nil. I don't know if Nil is supposed to be 0 or like because she feels like a 0. She is quote unquote trailer trash. She has her 2 best friends, Natalie and Bishop. There's going to be spoilers ahead. Lots of spoilers ahead. Her 2 best friends, Natalie and Bishop. Bishop, she ends up sort of having sort of becomes a romance interest. And then Natalie, who with somebody else, she's like obsessed with the game, and she was always going to do the game, always do the game. Bishop's like, I'm never doing the game. Heather's like, you guys are crazy. I'm not doing the game. I saved up money all the years to go to accounting school, even though I don't want to be an accountant. She's more of a writer type. Then her mom ends up taking her money because she needs a new transmission. So like now she's desperate, and now she's going to play the game. So we don't really know Heather as like the cautious, not afraid type. We only see her because it starts off right away. It's got to get the pace going and stuff. If it had a fast forward function, I would have fast played a lot of the episodes on double time. Just because sometimes they're building up tension. And you're like, come on, get to it already. We know that something's going to happen. And so Heather goes, and she doesn't just jump from the cliff. She jumps on the highest cliff. Which is like, okay, that's a little bit of like a push kind of moment of like, okay. So she's always afraid of everything. And all of a sudden she jumped from the highest point that nobody ever jumped from before. That got her all these extra points and this immunity and blah, whatever. Like, okay. But it is a significant moment. And I guess that's the way the first episode has to go. Now, it ends up being that both Natalie and Bishop are judges, and it's like, really, like, both of them, bit much. Now, I think Bishop is supposed to be because he's the best friend and sort of a romantic interest, but he's kind of not that interesting the character, actually. The more interesting characters are the ones playing Panic, because, like, why are you playing this game? Why are you doing this stupid stuff to be part of the game? You even have one point where, like, the guy who's, like, the liaison person, like, the MC guy, who's, like, Panic is dumb, but it's ours. And Heather's like, yeah, it's ours. And you're like, no, you guys are a bunch of idiots. Like, that happens in a scene after Heather's sister is led into a cage with a tiger that almost eats her. And you're like, I think things have gone too far. It's actually not part of Panic. It's part of someone who's trying to distract her from Panic. But it's like, you don't, at that point, they still think it's part of Panic. At that point, you don't say, Panic is ours. You're like, holy hell, things have gone too far. Like you have that with one of them, like they have the individual challenges. And one of the characters, her brother got hooked on drugs and stuff like that. After he witnessed, from the previous year, somebody committed suicide. Someone died. And we let her realize that it's actually suicide, which is also extreme situation. And that is messed up. So I don't know why there's so much messed upness going on here. But her individual challenge is to like, how many pills can you have before whatever? But the pills are really sugar pills. They're not real pills. But she's like, and he's like, dude, all you have to do was like, just take these pills. And she's like, that's too far. Like, even for this game, like, this is not something that we joke about. And that is right. So she lost the game. She's out of the game at that point. But she was right to take a stand there to say, like, you guys have gone too far. Like, there's stuff like spend a night in a haunted house. Yes, teens will do that. Not even for money, teens will do that. But when it's like, your brother's a junkie, take the pills. Like, no, you've gone too far now. Like, no, you have to face your fears and overcome them. Like, no, this is not something, like, you've gone too far with this one. Anyways.
That's legit. There are fears.
Yeah.
that are irrational, and then there are fears that make sense.
Yes.
Like spiders.
Yes. And even before the episode is played, or like someone has claustrophobia, so you have to spend the night in like a morgue thing, which is kind of gross and stupid, but you can still people will still do that for money.
Yes.
It's not exactly endangering his life. It's just ridiculous. So
Right.
even before the episode's played, they have all these warnings on them. Like, if you feel suicidal, call somebody, or like, don't try this at home, or like, all these things were done with special effects or blah, blah, whatever. Like, if you have to say all those things because you're afraid teens are going to do this, then teens should not be doing these sorts of things. What are you doing? Also, okay, 2 things now. No, okay, 3 things, and then we'll wrap up. But they're going to be, some of them are short and one of them's a little bit longer. Okay, one very short thing. Romance is a 4 because they show the teens sleeping together, okay? And, so they're actually connected. Why are they sleeping together? These are teens that, like, we don't even know. You see them have an attraction to each other. There's one time the girl goes over to the guy's house because she has to, like, tell him something. He tells her something. All of a sudden, they end up kissing. The next thing you know, that they're sleeping with each other. Like, how do people not end up pregnant with this sort of behavior? Which is not the reason to not sleep together. It's, you don't sleep together because stage over age, right? Which we met, another shout out to another episode where we spoke about that. But seriously, the first time you guys even like sort of kiss each other, you end up sleeping together. What is going on here? And then their relationship ends up like falling out in the end, but maybe they're still into each other, maybe not. It's irrelevant. What are you doing? And why are you showing this to us? In the middle of the day, what are you doing? Even if it wasn't in the middle of the day, what are you doing? That I was like, seriously, why is this here right now? Why are we seeing them stripped down? Which also, as Emily has mentioned before, are these teens that we're watching sleep together? Are they adults playing teens and watching sleep together? What is going on here? Okay, so that's why I put the romance at a 4. Just boom. It's partial nudity, but 4. Okay? There's also one scene where a girl goes into a car with another girl and she leans over and kisses her. And it's one kiss. And it's literally felt like such, I'm sorry to say this, but it's such a tokenism moment because they do not dwell on that relationship at all. Like, they're supposed to like, oh, look, we included the lesbians kind of thing. So like everyone got their shout out. But like the relationship had nothing to do with the story. Like it wasn't even relevant. And even later on at one point where it's like, oh, my girlfriend could be here while you're talking to me because the cops get involved, this whole thing. But it's like, at that point, you're like, okay, fine. I see that your girlfriend came to visit you. So you're like, okay. But like at that moment, she leans like to kiss her. You're like, why is this here right now? What is this doing here? And especially because me and romance, don't put extra kissing in. Why is this here?
Yeah.
So that's all that. Now, third point, last point. You have the one character who's supposed to be the bad boy. Okay, so his name is Ray. Ray is not a good person. Okay, he probably has slept with like every girl who would sleep with him. He's grown up in an abusive home, but he's actually a pretty intriguing character. He's a little bit of one of the more interesting characters because you actually see this arc that he goes on through playing Panic. He's considered a legacy because his brother won Panic like a few years ago. But he plays Panic. He's like totally fearless. He comes across as fearless. Like the whole thing's like a big joke to him. And like everything's just always like, oh, you needed me to jump? What do you think? Boom, he jumped. Like there's no like breathing moment. There's no like any moment. Like he's crazy. Like he comes across as totally crazy. He's cocky, confident, all that kind of stuff. He has this moment. It's interesting that for the guy, and I'm not defending him as a character. Like, no, he's not a good person. But he has this moment that when Heather jumps, it's almost like he tells her later because then he becomes the love interest. And it's supposed to be a love triangle, but Bishop is kind of like, who's one of the friends. He's like, he's not interesting. Like Ray is way more interesting. They have this moment where he's like, you jumped and it doesn't matter that you're pretty because I saw you fly. And it's almost like in that moment, he actually like saw Heather, which is kind of like what it is. So he actually starts like developing feelings for Heather, which you never thought Ray could have feelings for someone. And you see how they kind of like, because Heather's like, you're the crazy person. Like, I would never get together with you, blah, whatever. But like, you're still sort of attracted to him. And then you see how they find, like, they sort of understand each other. Like, we're both trailer trash, but like, we're both whatever. But, and it's interesting because that means that like this Ray guy who was raised in this home by like an abusive father and his older brother's really the one who looked out for him. So the way that he acts is really just because he had no one to guide him and not because he's an evil person, but he became like a not good person because he had no guidance. You see that he actually has a part of him that doesn't have to be like that. And maybe it's kind of idealistic to say like, oh, if Heather could be a good influence on him, I don't think he's ever going to become a judge or a lawyer or like a multimillionaire. But like maybe he'll pick up a job in like roofing. I can almost see him doing roofing, because he'd be unafraid of going up. He'd get a job in roofing, maybe get into lower middle class, and then his kids would be able to be middle class kids, and he'd be able to pull them out, like if he had the right people guiding him. So it's interesting that you see that. They don't really dwell on that so much, but you kind of see that, and you're like, this kid doesn't have to be the bad kid if you just have the right kind of guidance. And just to wrap it up, the most interesting thing about this is that, so he's going after Heather, and Heather basically sort of falls for him and all that kind of stuff, which is like, okay, whatever. But there's this one scene in the haunted house, because the first time they do make out on at a party, whatever, but like she's like, oh, I was drunk, it wasn't anything. And he's like, are you sure it wasn't anything? So he's always like in her face. Like he goes after her, like which Bishop never did. But, so here's the interesting thing. They're in the haunted house, and they're all supposed to like survive the night in the haunted house, find the clues, whatever. So he pulls her aside, they start making out, blah, blah, they start stripping down. Which again, you're like, what are you doing? Stop it, people! But at one point, so he pulls out, I think it's like a pack of condoms that he pulls out, and she's like, oh, like, you have this here? And he's like, you always have to be prepared or something. And you're like, okay, crazy person. But he realizes, I don't know, at one point he realizes that she hasn't slept with anybody before. And he's like, what? And she's like, no, of course. Like, she tries to pretend like she has. And he's like, no, put your clothes back on. And she's like, what? You'll sleep with anybody, but you won't sleep with me? And it's like, yeah, because you are not just anybody to him anymore. And like, this is not the way it's going to go down between you two. Like, put your clothes back on. Which is actually, I don't want to say I hate, but I really don't like the whole scene and the whole setup. But there is something to be said for that moment where he realizes that like, this is not just all the other girls that he ever slept with were, like, maybe he was able to do that because they were irrelevant to him. And no one taught him that this is not supposed to be something of irrelevancy. This is supposed to be something special and blah, blah, all that stuff. So like now they actually found a girl that he sort of cares about that didn't expect it. Like, no, it's not just going to happen in the middle of a haunted house somewhere. Like, it's not going to go down like this because you actually mean something to me. We still want to see them married first before anything happens. But that's actually a big moment because it shows that he can stop himself. It shows that he did stop himself. And he said, like, no, it's not going to be like this. Which, again, it goes to the fact that all the times that they're feeding the kids, all these people are sleeping with each other and all that kind of stuff, like, teach them to stop yourself because you mean more to me. Not because, oh, I love you, so that means we have to sleep together. Like, no, because I love you, that means things are not just going to be, like, irrelevant. Right?
Yeah.
Stage before age, get married first. But that was actually, and that's why also Ray's such an interesting character, because he made a good decision there by saying no. You know, I don't know, though, eventually, like, he's done other stuff, like, he goes down on her, or whatever. Like, there's other stuff that occurs, and they'll probably end up sleeping together before they get married. Maybe not, but the series ends before that. So who knows? And if there is another season, if they just show Ray as this, like, crazy guy and not follow up on this, like, I don't know if I'll watch it, but it'll be very disappointing. You also don't have a moment where, even though he's the bad guy, it's not like, oh, I'm the bad guy, Heather, so start smoking with me. Like, you don't have that. He doesn't ever try to make her, like, go along with his bad stuff.
Into him.
Which is also... So that's why, but it also just goes to show that sometimes these bad boy guys or whatever, like sometimes it's just about having the right guidance and the right, we just spoke about male role models and all that kind of, we were referencing a lot of previous episodes with it. Anyway, so that to me was more interesting and intriguing. This whole panic thing, certain things get like a little out of hand and something gets like a way intense, and that's why everything's at the fore. I don't know why they have to be dropping all the F-bombs, even though that's probably the way they speak. Violence is a fore because we do see gruesome beating upness and there is death. And suicide is mentioned in it and all these things and the romance, why are they sleeping together, whatever. But for me, that's actually the from all of it, that's what stuck out to me the most was this one character who like didn't have to be just because he was born into it. And you see he's someone who's like, I don't mind the smell of poor because it's the smell of like people who are working and like trying versus rich people who smell like plastic, whatever. It's interesting how she did that. But other than that, don't watch it. Well, I shouldn't say don't watch it. Just realize that there's everything in it. I don't know if it's something that kids should be watching. Definitely not kids. That's what I have to say about that. My rant for today.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And as always happens after Out rants, I need a cup of chocolate milk or hot cocoa, depending upon the season. But it's summer, so we're going with chocolate milk because it's too hot for hot cocoa. But sort of like Harry Potter needing chocolate after he faces a Dementor, after you face an Out rant, you just need an infusion of chocolate to rejuvenate. So I'm going to go make myself a glass of chocolate milk. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers, everyone. Oh My Word podcast is brought to you by the pearl-clutching basement dwellers at Oh My Word. Follow us on Instagram for updates at Oh My Word podcast, or like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For full episode notes and detail, visit eltenenbaum.com. Music is by Tim Burke. See you next time.